Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. So today we are going live with Osman Mahmoud Khan, who is a risk analyst at Deloitte for the IT department. Here we go. Osman Saab, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam, Murtaza.
How are you?
I'm all right. How are
Good,
you?
good, good. All is well. Thank you so much for joining me on my live today. Appreciate you sparing some time out from your busy schedule at home.
No, not a problem at all. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
So the whole reason I do these live sessions is to share knowledge and positivity amongst the human population, wherever they may be, wherever they're listening, whether it's on the live right now, whether it's later on, whenever. So this live will stay on my profile. Um, and during this whole negative impact that's going on around the world, it'd be the pandemic,
Yeah,
lockdown, it'd be financial crisis, anything like that. It's all about moving aside from that and coming up with positive motion in your life. And this is why I have people like yourself come up here, uh, business individuals, investors, musicians, for example. I had a magician the other one time, all that kind of stuff. So it's just to show that there are people out there that are still being positive. So why can't you? So
makes
that's
sense.
why I have you today. So thank you so much for joining me. Before we start, Usman, if you could start with who you are and what you do, and then we can get the conversation going.
Yeah, sure, Murtaza. And first of all, I'd like to reiterate your message of positivity. I think the way I do things is there are some things in your control and there are some things that are not.
Of course.
But you don't have the things that you don't have control over, no need to stress about them. But the things that you do have control over, like your immediate house, your family, their well-being, you should always strive to make that better.
Of course.
And then just a little bit of background on me is so like Murtaza mentioned, my name is Usman and I work at Deloitte as a consultant in their risk advisory practice. And I started my journey back when I did my undergraduate at the University of Hertfordshire,
Okay.
and I did a bachelor's in business studies, and then right after that I did my master's. I got my MSc in business systems analysis and design. I was always drawn towards IT as a young kid, and that seemed like a natural progression for me.
Okay.
And after that I got a job at RBS, which lasted me for about 2 years before I. Also, that was in Manchester, but I really wanted to get back to London, so I found a role that was available here, and now I'm in Deloitte's risk advisory practice, working in the field called governance, risk, and compliance.
Wow. It sounds very complicated. Um,
It's not as interesting as a magician, but it's all right.
you are doing magic in the IT department, which is good. So you mentioned that when you were young, you were drawn towards IT. I mean, coming from Pakistan, me and you are the same age. We both came from Pakistan, studied here, and now we are in our business fields.
Hmm.
In Pakistan, at that point, we're going back, what, 20 years ago, 25 years ago? The IT situation in Pakistan, was it as great as it's today?
No, from what I haven't worked there for quite some time, but just on the surface, it seems to have made great strides. So I was a business analyst by profession, and a field like that in IT in Pakistan didn't exist about maybe 20 years ago, as you described.
Yep,
And it's the role that bridges your development side to the business side.
of course.
And it just wasn't there. We just hadn't matured to that point. But now I see so many great companies like in-house that are coming up and are catering to the digital needs of Pakistanis.
Okay.
It's so from the consumer angle, I can see that a lot is being done and a lot has happened in the last 20 years, especially. 20 years ago, we were like, I think we were just there was I think internet
We were on
was
we were on dial-ups.
yeah, we were on dial-up at that point, weren't we? So yeah, I think we have made great strides.
Good stuff. What drove you towards being in IT? Bearing in mind there was not such a progression in Pakistan about IT at that point. What drove you towards it?
Easy. So I got my PC when I was about 10 years old, and period. That's the end of story.
That
But
was
I think it really captured my imagination, and I was really into it, even more so than the kids, like my friends at least. I'm sure there were people with more prowess, like proper hackers,
yeah.
sitting in on their PCs. But I wasn't one of them. But just that side really attracted me, and I would.
So are you telling me do you know how to hack?
No, no, no. But I was responsible for bombing one of my uncle's mailboxes when he said I couldn't.
Okay.
Just I wasn't a hacker as such, but yeah, I like to play around with things. And uh, believe it or not, my family wanted me to do chartered accountancy.
Wow.
I'm not an accountant. Like
That's
I'm not an accountant.
typical Asian,
Yeah.
right? You gotta be an accountant, you gotta be a doctor, you gotta be a lawyer. They give you
Yeah, that's it, right? The engineer thing used to be there around 20 years ago, but even that's faded out.
of course.
But yeah, I completely agree. So that was a path that I initially took. I did not enjoy it one bit. And again, I found myself looking at IT options. That is just like things, the signs of the universe just always lead me back to this. And I feel when you enjoy doing something, it actually just becomes easier. So it's difficult to find a job that that both A pays the bills and B that you enjoy doing. So to make that activity that you do to pay your bills, but just better, enjoyable.
So
So
we're,
yeah,
we're clear in that fact that you currently enjoy what you're doing.
I do greatly. Yeah, I
That's
do.
no, that's good to know because a lot of people in this world are doing jobs that they don't like, but they're stuck in it because they have to pay their bills and all that kind of stuff. So, again, that sort of negativity as well. But knowing from what you're doing, so if you can do it, anyone can do it. It's
I
about
stand by that.
and enjoying that and getting that done. So you did your studies in Pakistan. Whose decision
Yeah.
was it for you to come to London to study?
Um, I was really looking for an avenue into not maybe necessarily the UK, but just abroad for a little bit of exposure.
Okay.
I felt that was important, and I found a degree in Pakistan actually, at the Shahid Zulfikar University, and Zabis as it's more commonly
Yeah.
known,
Yeah.
and which offered me an external degree with the promise of my graduation happening in the UK.
Okay.
So that was advertised. I jumped on that, and I made that system work for me, and I ended up in my third and final year in London. I'll
Did
just
you
out
see,
a bit.
did you see a lot of difference studying at university? I mean, I've studied in school and colleges in Pakistan, but I've never studied at university in Pakistan. So the studies at the university in Pakistan, are they lacking to the university studies in the UK or they are more advanced?
I wouldn't say the curriculum was lacking, but I just think the way the process is run is just much more better in the UK. Uh, it's I think it takes time for an industry to mature to that point, and as we all know, the UK has been in the education game, exporting education far longer than we have in Pakistan. There is a difference. I wouldn't. It's just the maybe a quality, not the curriculum, more, but more just the way it's delivered. but I think, I mean, I'm not holding anyone fault at that. I think it's just a natural maturity that, that's just seen here. And I'm guessing definitely in the States as well, or any other country that's known for its education.
Of course. Um, so when you came to study here in your final year,
Hmm.
did you, or when you left Pakistan, did you always think that, okay, once I graduate and I do my post graduation, UK is going to be the place that I find my first job? Or did you always think that you're going to go back, help the country, build what you're building out here for yourself and your family and the company that you're working for? Or did you just think, no, UK is the place that I want to work?
Well, I initially wasn't steadfast in the UK, but when I came here, I warmed up to the place, to the
Okay.
way things are done, just the systematic way things are done.
Okay.
And I really enjoyed that environment. I did go back to Pakistan after graduating from my master's program,
Yep.
and I got married. I got a job, but always wanted myself yearning back to go to London.
Okay.
So I was applying, willy-nilly every single place that I could find.
Sure.
And it's difficult to be sitting in Pakistan and looking for a job in the UK. It's
Of course.
not impossible, but it's just a little bit difficult. But
They could call you tomorrow and you're still in Pakistan, right? So it's
sorry?
they would call you for an interview tomorrow and if you're sitting in Pakistan, it's not possible.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just to give our listeners a guide that how I did it. I literally had a Skype that had a UK based number. I wanted to appear as native as possible in my applications. I
Yeah,
didn't want a +92 300 number over there as my contact details. I wanted things to be very professional,
of
so
course.
people don't even think twice that this guy is not in the UK. When it comes to that hurdle, we'll deal with that. But that was my policy. And one such company that I applied to, RBS, was going through a massive change at that time. They were trying to divest about
This is
um,
going back how many years ago?
this is about exactly this is about 4 years ago. And the crisis, 2008 crisis had happened. The UK economy was still reeling from the effects. um, RBS, the Royal Bank of Scotland, was trying to divest some of their branches and spin it off as another bank. So they had hired me to work on that program to separate that other challenger bank from the main.
Stop you here for a second.
Mhm.
Question just came to my mind. I believe you come from an industrialist background, right? Where your father has businesses and
We come from textile, yeah.
yeah. Did your father ever say to you that, son, why are you going to the UK and working there? Why don't you join the business out here and look at the risk analysis, IT, set it up here, then going and set up another company? I mean, working for another company in the UK. Did your father ever say that to you?
My father's friends actually said that a lot, and my father, on the other hand, was very supportive of me finding my own path in this and just doing what I enjoy doing. I'm sure, like, I want to be back in Pakistan. My family is there, so that's where my heart is. And there are just a few things I need to check off the list before I can make that ultimate dream come true.
Of course.
But in the meanwhile,
You've
my
got a
parents,
you've got a you've got a to-do list before you
yeah,
go.
I've got a to do. Exactly. It's a path. Let's call it a 5 year plan. Maybe it's more like a 10 year plan, but but ultimately, I do want to go back and set up shop over there. And my parents, both my parents, have been very supportive in that respect.
Good stuff. So coming back here, you were mentioning about the overhaul in RBS and how when you joined in, it they were going through this massive process of changing
Yeah.
uh, their organization. Can you take me
Mhm.
through?
Yeah, of course. So RBS had suffered majorly in the 2008 crisis. The government, the taxpayers had bailed it out, and it was a government order to basically spin off a lot of its branches, or if I'm remembering correctly, around 113 in England, not Scotland, in
Okay.
England and Wales, and to spin them off as a new challenger bank called Williams and Glyn.
Okay.
Um, and then I remember, so the plan, so that was 2 years ago, and we don't know any bank called Williams and Glyn. That's because Brexit happened. so
Yeah.
Brexit, so Brexit happened, the entire program shut down because it just wasn't feasible anymore. And RBS basically scrapped the plan to divest those branches, and they're more or less RBS now, or NatWest as we know them in England.
Yep. How was it working in a banking environment?
Well, I came from a software background and I was working in the IT department of a bank, and it was very different. At an IT firm, there's an IT culture. Like you can wear shorts and you can wear, you can wear Hawaiian shirts to work if you want. But at a bank, it's banking culture. It's a suit and black shoes, and and but I felt just overall reflective of the environment in the UK. They're very. I had an amazing time. Like I made some really good friends and who taught me how it works, and I felt the system here is very supportive. Like they recognize that if me in this case, if I don't know something and if I ask for it, there's no rebuke. It's we're all in this together. That's
There's,
just the
there's
sentiment that I get from
all,
here.
all the problems that you're facing and all that stuff.
Exactly. People are very supportive here, and they're very big on family issues, and it's a very familial culture. Like when I left RBS, I was very sad. I mean, that's how I equated that culture. That was the place that gave me my first shot.
Of course.
And but working at Deloitte, it's also very similar. Like if you need support, like you work with some of the smartest people in the world, and B, they're also some of the most humble people in the world. Everybody's ready to help you out, to listen to your problems, and just make the situation work for you. Because if it
Why
works for you, it works for them.
go for the change from RBS? The reason I asked is because you were enjoying your time at RBS, but was
I
there some
was.
working environment?
Well, yes, the role I had gotten, it was based in Manchester,
Okay.
and I had agreed because it was my shot into the UK economy.
Yep.
And but I delayed my time. I started off in London, and I delayed it as much as I could. I delayed it to a year, believe it or not, and I just because it was the only city I knew in England, and sorry, and
That's right.
the most comfort yeah, and the most comfortable, I'm the most comfortable here. And when I moved to Manchester, I was open to give it a shot, but I really missed London, and that was the primary reason for me just looking externally. Then obviously for a place only in London, that was the only condition.
How easy was it to get to Deloitte?
Well, RBS, like the industry moves at a different pace than consultancies. I had a bit of an awakening when I joined. The way I describe it to people is if in RBS, in relation to my work, if I was driving a car maybe at 30 miles per hour, one car, I'm just cruising basically. In Deloitte, I had to drive four cars simultaneously, all going at 80 miles per hour. So it's a little difference in pace and the work and the amount of work that's done because you're dealing with multiple, clients, and you're pretty. I mean, you're repeating the process again and again, but again, a lot of moving parts are happening simultaneously, and you just have to be very aware of what's going on.
Good stuff. How would you describe your work at Deloitte right now? What is it that you do, and how is it that you help them in
Mhm.
progressing from? Obviously, all clients are different, right?
Of
So how
course, yeah.
come into picture when you're dealing with client A to client B to client C? How does it work?
Well, you're right. No client is the same. Everyone's different. Maybe you can bucket them into industries, but again, that's painting a really broad picture. If once you sign on a client project, you'll see, even if on paper if it looks the same as your previous one, it's vastly different because everyone has their way of doing things, and you as the consultant have to adapt to that
Of
and
course,
build them a solution which is not just a generic one, but which is made perfectly for their business architecture.
of course. And what does the job entitle you doing? I know you said risk management, but
Mhm.
sort of risk managements do these companies have within the IT infrastructure?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, I'm a business analyst by profession. My job is to go to a client and map out all their processes. And the way we work in risk is that you have that basic our job is to identify, uh, if it hasn't been done already, you have to identify risk points across all their processes, and there's so many categories of risk as well. The one, like, if you're looking at their operations, that operational risk, and if you're looking at cyber, the thing that really excites me personally on a personal level, it's vastly different. But again, our job is to make sure the client has a solution in place that can help them quantify the risk. Because 20 years ago, like, there was, it was in the back of your head that something might happen, but you didn't have a process to deal with such situations. I mean, it didn't exist at that point, so no blame on companies at that time. But then soon you saw threats coming up on the horizon, and new hostile actors coming in. You hear all these concerted attacks that are happening in a very coordinated fashion. Believe it or not, some of these criminal rings that do all these scams, like, they do, I heard they do PowerPoint presentations. Like, somebody like pays them really good money, and they and event, like, it's a very coordinated affair. And in this day
Like
and age,
banks and companies like Deloitte have upped their games. Scam are up their games also in terms of looking as professional, yet scamming the banks, public. So,
exactly. And it's funny because right now, in these strange and unprecedented times of COVID-19, and just the scare around the whole idea, it's very, I think when people are frightened, it makes them more vulnerable. So a
of course,
lot of scams are literally happening right now. People posing to be banks, and getting personal information out, and people just giving it to them. So on a professional level, we've noticed that there's been a really, like, high spike in these kind of frauds and scams that are happening to, what do you call, just take advantage of vulnerable people. So
since lockdown.
yes, just in the lockdown, like, we've heard a lot of things, like we like people are, like, companies are being, because hackers, all these threat actors, they know that you're working from home,
Of course.
and people are trying out this new process of working from home. Like, not a lot of companies have done this before, and now they're slowly adapting. So
Yeah.
they're taking advantage of this confusion right now, this part where we're just making up the process and refining it. So people like I was warned that somebody posing as HR is calling up people, from whatever company you work at,
Okay.
and asking them for personal information. And like EasyJet, again, in an industry that's not doing so well right now, they just had a massive data breach, and we saw around 9 million customers' personal data got stolen, as
Wow.
well as around, I think, 2,000 people, more than 2,000 individuals whose credit card details were stolen. So all these things, like, these things continue to happen, but they've seen a spike right now.
So these are the risks that organizations, governments, people are facing, and people like yourself within the risk assessment department, the risk analyst department are sort of looking at, and that's how you're building your softwares and to protect.
Exactly.
massive community out here.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
that's good to know.
Like yeah, to like building out processes to at least place controls over some of these risks to at least minimize, if not completely eradicate the risk, but at least minimize the possibility of it happening. Just keeping, you know, yourself and the organization as safe as possible.
Of course.
Just a big hint, if you receive any external emails, like I'd always read it at least not twice but thrice before clicking on any links.
Of course, and myself, when I like sometimes I get emails. I use a company called One and One for my website, right?
Okay.
And sometimes they tell me, "Oh, your mailbox is full. You need to go and action this." But when
Mm-hmm.
you email that it's been sent from,
Mm-hmm.
okay, it might say One and One, but then at is something totally different. You
Yeah.
that from One and One. So things like this, people need to check up on, and like you mentioned, read the email twice, thrice, four times until you understand it. And if you don't understand it, call up the company and ask them whether they've sent the email or not.
Exactly. Yeah,
It's
I completely agree. And you bring up a very important point. It's very important to see carefully read that address because, you know, if you're expecting a mail from Google, you might just get something from, I don't know, joogle.com, you know, and you might disregard it because it looks similar, but if you read, you know, closely, you'll see the difference.
Of course. Um, Now, one of the main questions that I want to ask is Deloitte being such a large multinational organization, especially in the UK as well,
Mm-hmm.
how are they adopting themselves post lockdown, the new normal? How are they
Mm-hmm.
adopting themselves and how are they looking after the employees so that they can keep their employees safe with the distance, social distancing? How are they adopting to that?
Yeah, fair question. I as our some aspects of our job, like you can not some aspect like all to do what we do, we just need a laptop at the end of the day.
Gotcha.
Obviously there are client meetings as well, and which are not possible at the moment, but Zoom has really filled in that gap. Like we've always been used to a little bit
I
of
mean,
remote working.
the market share of Zoom has boomed because companies like Deloitte,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
that's right. That's right. You know, but you also encounter a lot of cases where like random people just join your Zoom meeting. It hasn't happened to me, but I've read about it. But yeah, but Zoom's taking care of it really well. I see a lot of potential in this company that I never heard of back, you know, before the lockdown happened.
of course.
But yeah, but like for example, like I was in a project that uh, I had to liaise with a lot of teams across the globe, and because I wasn't working with anyone in London, for example, um, there was no point in me coming to the office. So me and my entire team in the whole project just work from home most of the time. So I've been working from home since October. So when the lockdown happened, I think my team was a little bit more prepared because we've already been doing it. But because everyone there's a big culture of work from home where I come from, so they just needed to see if they could scale their IT to the point where they could accommodate every single person to work remotely, and they succeeded, and it's been working great for me so far. You know, if you need to meet a client, Zoom. I know it's not the same as being face to face, which I really miss,
Yeah.
but it helps, and I mean you got to do the best
So
in these strange
are
circumstances.
they planning to bring their employees back to work or keep them at home?
Not that I've heard of. I think we're taking a cue from the government on this. When you know when things are relaxed, we'll get relaxed. But because we've been doing it successfully so far, I don't think that we are nobody anybody is in a rush to you know to go back into the office and just to start that whole process again. When things cool down, they relax and they get better, then maybe. But no, I haven't heard anything.
From what you're saying, and maybe I'm wrong, but if they don't bring employees back and majority of the employees are working from home, like yourself, like over
Hmm.
a certain period of time, then I believe that office space is going to be empty. or that commercial building where Deloitte is going to be empty, and possibly it might
Well,
fail.
you bring up an important point, but I don't think we're alone in
Of course,
in this current problem, right?
it's all empty there. So
Yeah, like I imagine like my local takeaway from my high street. Now I go there, right? To obviously you can't sit there anymore, but the way they've done it, they've introduced plexiglass and they've taken some measures to minimize that risk that attached to to the coronavirus. And my feeling is that all companies before they start. Now I'm not speaking for Deloitte, but I have a feeling that all companies will introduce some measures or the other to give not their employees a little bit of assurance that steps are being taken to safeguard their safety. And um, I don't think anybody's in a real rush to bring everyone back, because especially because if the system is working well for you. But
that's
obviously you're right, the opportunity cost of having a like prime real estate just sit there. Well, I guess I'll chalk it up to maybe an to a I don't know, like again an opportunity cost, but not a real loss, right? What's bigger than the health of your employees,
of
and not just the health, but more importantly, the perception of health. Because if me as an employee feels unsafe, then I'm not going to be as productive as as like I'm not going to be my 100%.
course.
And once I feel like I'm completely done and dusted, safe, covered in head to toe with that radiation suit,
Yeah, yeah,
then maybe I'll definitely be 100%, right? I'll feel like the company is taking steps to to safeguard my health.
of course. One final question before we wrap up this live
Sure.
is, I ask this to every guest that comes onto my live, and the whole point of me doing this is, what's the advice you would give to people out there who are in that negative set of mind, especially, for example, Pakistan, where there's a lot of unemployment going on? I don't know if a lot of Pakistani viewers are going to watch this, but unemployment, financial crisis, people dream of coming to the UK, all that kind of stuff. And in the UK as well, negativity, pandemic, financial crisis, businesses going bust.
Yeah.
What positive advice would you like to give them?
Well, I want to reiterate something I mentioned in the beginning. When there are things in your control and there are things that are not. And regardless of, your personal view on the situation, there's obviously steps being taken by various governments across the world, including Pakistan, which are preventing people from going back to work and to adapt to a different lifestyle. So my advice would be to people would be there are things in your control that you just can't do anything about. Like you can vent about it, you can complain about it, but the fact remains that it's going to be there. And then there are things in your control, so which are completely in your power to solve and change. And that's the part that people should be focused on. So if you are negatively impacted by COVID-19, I would my advice would be to do what you're doing as best as you can, adapting to this new situation, but accepting the reality that we are living in. um, it's not going to go away anytime soon, but I heard in Pakistan they're easing it out slowly, so hopefully soon people will be able to resume normal life. As a Muslim, it was Eid a couple of days ago, and uh, it felt like a really strange Eid, because that one day is all about meeting your friends and
Of
family.
course.
And we couldn't do that, and it was my son's fifth birthday as well, and it was literally, and his mother who were there, obviously family over remotely, they obviously
Yeah.
joined. It's not the same though. And but yeah, but what can you do, right?
I mean, you got to
We try
move
to
on.
make the best of
But
the situation.
like you mentioned, there are things which are not in your control. Don't think about them. Think about the things that are in
Exactly.
your control and work towards them. Try to achieve those goals. Like you have a to-do list before you do anything,
Yeah. Exactly.
have you here. And it's been a great talk. Thank you so much for discussing of what you do at a multinational firm like Deloitte, how your journey was coming from Pakistan to today, sharing all these positive advices. Thank you so much for coming on, Usman.
Thank you very much, Murtaza. It's been my pleasure. Hopefully, let's do this again. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
So that was Usman Mahmood, a risk analyst who works at Deloitte, consulting clients all over the world, like he mentioned. So do check out this live on how companies are adopting themselves for the new norm, and especially with all these scams that are coming on, it's good to know about these things, because governments and politicians, or maybe even your family members, might not give you this advice, but this advice would come from people like who are in the industry. So do check out this live. Again, today I've got another live session with a property investor, overseas property investor, later on at 3 o'clock. And if you're interested for properties, I know I'm in London, I deal with properties in London, but I'm speaking to someone who is all the way in Philadelphia today, a real estate agent in Philadelphia. So do check that out. That's live at 6 p.m. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Usman for joining me. And thank you to all the viewers that tuned in. It's been a pleasure to have you. Take care. Bye-bye.